practicalities of the virtual meeting, so bear with us for a moment before we formally start the meeting.
How is my sound, folks?
We hear you loud and clear, Catherine.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, good morning. Calling the meeting, the emergency fire costs meeting to order at 10:03 on September 3rd, 2024. Members in attendance, I see Chris Johnson is here, Eric Lease is here in person, and Catherine Van Netta is with us virtually. Committee staff include Nancy Hirsch and Lorna Hobbs, who are here in person. And I look to Chris to see, is there anybody online that we need confirmation of who they are? We can always go back as you look through that if there's any phone numbers or anything. A reminder for those online that public comment is agenda item number 11 at the end of the agenda, and I will give a quick reminder as we get closer to that. Meeting materials were emailed to committee members prior to the meeting, and the meeting materials will be available online on the Board of Forestry website under committees, EFCC, as soon as possible. We recognize that they're not online yet. We apologize due to some technical challenges getting those uploaded, and any additional information that is provided during the meeting will be posted to that website as quickly as possible after the meeting. To start things off, just with some comments from me, I think it's important for everyone online to recognize that fire season 2025 has been a challenge. And this has been a very difficult season. And there's a lot I could say, but I frankly think the single most important thing to say is thank you. Thank you to ODF's IMTs, to ODF staff behind the scenes helping to bring order to chaos. Thank you for the firefighters and the support staff who are sleeping in tents on the ground in some sad cow pasture somewhere. And thank you to everyone who is engaged, including, the ODF, the federal contractors, private landowners. And I also want to say thank you to OSFM, their teams, their task force, and the rural fire departments, and everything that they also provide to the complete and coordinated system. It's been a tough season. We're not through it yet, but it is a testament to the strength of the system and to the people who make up that system that has allowed us to see the successes that we have so far. Moving on to the EFCC ODF eligibility policy work group. I'm only going to briefly touch on this. We have this as an agenda item later. This work group, which comprised of EFCC staff and ODF staff, was established in our June meeting. Since then, the work group has met several times and has dedicated dozens of hours to this very important effort. It's been a collaborative process. I believe it's been very rigorous too, and the work that has been done. And we'll tackle more about that under agenda item 7. And finally, I'll touch quickly on the ODF OSFM Sustainable Fire Funding Work Group. It's ongoing. I really don't have much to update this committee on from an EFCC perspective. It's a very large group and trying to tackle a very large and complex problem. Frankly, we're still just working through the process. Okay, let's get started here with agenda item number 2, approval of the minutes of the June 4th meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes as emailed to the committee members?
So moved.
Okay, motion by Eric, a second.
Second by Catherine.
All right, all those in favor to approve the meeting minutes of July 4th, 2024, please respond with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, no opposed, the motion carries. Agenda item number 3, the financial status of the Oregon Forest Land Protection Fund. Ms. Hobbs, can you please give the financial update to the committee?
Certainly. Good morning. My name is Lorna Hobbs. I'm the EFCC Finance Coordinator. My report today covers both the Oregon Forest Land Protection Fund's fiscal year 2024 ending balance and revenue and expenditure projections for fiscal year 2025. Both reports were in the meeting packet, and we were going to be showing fiscal year 25 on screen. Starting with the report for fiscal year 2024, the ending balance on June 30th, 2024 was $10,843,915. Total revenues received came to $12,068,663. Total expenditures were $13,153,500, plus the transfer accounted for the $100,873 from Coos Forest Protective Association for fire season 19. Claim total net estimate for fiscal year 2024 claims is right now at $35,378,292. I can pause there if there's any questions on the ending balance.
No questions, but I will say fantastic estimates relative to actuals. Wow, good job.
Okay, so moving on to fiscal year 25. The beginning balance on July 1 was $10,811,138. And that beginning balance is slightly different from the ending balance just due to timing when I get my reports and when I request that beginning balance. So looking at assessment revenues for 2025, right now currently projected to be $9.4 million. Assessment acres are updated usually around December of every year, so that number is going to change after those numbers, acreage numbers are updated. Harvest taxes are estimated at slightly over $2 million. Interest income is projected at around $423 million. The interest rate did rise in July from 5.2% to 5.3%. Estimated total revenue for FY25 is $11,886,343. Projected revenues, basically, we're keeping with 185,000 as an estimate for operating and payroll expenses, and then severity costs at the $3 million. For the current fire season draft claims, when my report was printed, net claim total was about 61.8 million. And today it's at just slightly over 63 million. We have, Nancy did approve an advance to the Douglas Forest Protective Association for $4 million for the Dixon fire. And estimated expenditures for FY25 is at 13.185 million, with an estimated fund balance on June 30th, 2025 at $9,590,395. That is the end of my report.
Thank you, Lorna. Any questions from committee members? Okay. Let's move on to item number 4, the previous fiscal claims update. Again, Ms. Hobbs, can you give an update?
Again, Lorna Hobbs, EFCC Finance Coordinator. The claim estimate summary was provided in your meeting packet and shows estimated gross costs, reimbursements from other agencies, FEMA claims and responsible party reimbursements, the district's deductibles, and the net claim total. I'm just going to quickly highlight net claim costs and the status of each fiscal year. So starting with FY17, the draft claims are at about a $9,590,557 for net total. All the claims have been closed. They should be in the process of being closed by ODF Finance, and then we will sit down and reconcile that fiscal year. FY18 net is about just over 35.2 million. We have 7 claims still open and 3 of the claims have been closed. FY19 is about 40.6 million. 6 claims open, 2 are closed. FY20 is 10.59 million with 4 claims open, no claims closed. FY21 net is around 42 million. All claims are open and none are closed. 2022 is at 42 million. And again, no claims have been closed. 20, sorry, I lost my place. 2022 was the insurance year. For the fiscal year, it's about 54.2 million net. And we are still waiting on some cost recoveries and responsible or cost share and responsible parties and an admin claim for the bootleg fire, but as far as the insurance claim is concerned, we're very close to getting that all closed up, and it should only be a month or so before we can close that out. FY '23, the net is 18.46 million, and there were 10 claims that year. And last year, FY '24, at 35.378 million with 11 claims for last year. And if you need any additional information, I'm happy to provide it for you.
Any questions from committee members? Okay. Hearing none, I don't have any either. Thank you for this report. Yeah, thank you for the report. Okay, let's carry on to agenda item number 5, the weather update. Ms. Alcock, are you with us? Welcome.
Good morning, everyone.
Can you please give the weather synopsis for us?
I'll try to do this here. Let me try and share my screen. There we go. So yeah, I'm going to blast through quite a few slides, a little bit of a whirlwind here for you guys. Let's get through it. Today's Tuesday, September 3rd. Take a look. So first thing, usually on the first of the month, we get a new National Wildland Fire Significant Fire Potential Outlook. So we'll take a look at that. And then I wanted to go over what just happened over the weekend with some of our fire weather, some thunderstorm activity, and hazards and warnings we just got through. And then take a look at some temperatures and RH, relative humidity. And then just a quick glance really at the ODF significant fire potential map and some information about our indices and how we're tracking. And then I wanted to devote a little bit of time to east winds. We have some great products from our ODF smoke management meteorologists. They keep this up to date here and help us understand when we're going to get potential east winds and low humidity for the western Cascades in Oregon. And then we'll take a look at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association's forecasts, the 6 to 10 day, a couple of those. And then I'm only going to show really the 1 month lookout instead of a 3 month, and you'll see why. And then we'll round out with the Northwest Coordination Center's fire potential outlook. So with that good overview, hopefully we'll go through these pretty fast. So just kind of oddly enough, our September outlook has now reduced back down to normal significant fire potential. And some of our meteorologists and fire analysts in the area were looking at the potential for this La Nina to begin to affect us. They also are looking at low pressure systems forming in Alaska right now that could be coming our way. But the first half of the month is really going to be this warm and dry that's going to be forecasted, and I'll show you guys in a minute. But the last half of the month is a little bit more encouraging. So this slide is showing you in the center panel the September outlook as it is right now, as of September 1st. But I wanted to remind us that we just came through an above normal potential forecast for September for most of Eastern Oregon and Southern Oregon. So the lines look clean on the map, but I'm sure it's quite fuzzy still. But the important point to note is October, November, and December, kind of what we usually see, which is fire season potential really starts to taper off. So just over Labor Day, as I was putting this presentation together, I always look at the Storm Prediction Center's thunderstorm outlooks and things. And so we just went through a critical fire weather phase in Eastern Oregon, most of the state, most of the east side of the state. And they had scattered and mixed wet and dry thunderstorms. They had low RH in areas and a lot of squirrely winds. And so the top left was the forecast for isolated dry thunderstorms. You can see the eastern part of the state, really the Great Basin, the northern part of the Great Basin. We've had this monsoonal moisture finally come up this way a little ways. And then they had a lot of wind in the gorge, and they're still expecting a little bit of this wind to affect the gorge. And then they had the red flag warnings with low humidity, lightning, and so it's just a blast over Labor Day weekend. The middle panel is showing that there was moisture along with the thunderstorm activity, and that's, you know, encouraging, but not that much moisture. So there was the mix. And then on the right panel, I just wanted to draw out that we do have this dry thunderstorm matrix, also produced by ODF Smoke Management meteorologists. And thanks to Pete Parsons for keeping this one up to date for us. We are looking at the potential thunderstorms, largely dry Friday and Saturday, starting in Friday and Saturday for most of the state. Really, it's western and central and eastern Oregon. It's going to start at the bottom end in southern Oregon, and you'll see that in a few slides. So that's just kind of what happened to us over the weekend. And right now we are looking at heat advisories in effect from noon to 8 o'clock on Thursday. So we've got high pressure is going to be sitting over us here starting really Tuesday afternoon. Today, this afternoon, we're going to see much warmer conditions, highs in the 90s and low hundreds in Southwest Oregon. Low hundreds, here we go, in the North Willamette Valley and the Dalles. Thursday and Friday are going to be the hot days for us. And then we can start to see temperatures back off Sunday into Monday. So we are going to be experiencing some heat, and the humidity is going to drop down significantly, especially west side. We're starting to look at the east winds, low humidity, east wind potential. So we could get down into the 20s on the west side, and that's pretty dry for west side areas. Northeast Oregon, southeast, they've been seeing teens quite a bit, so that's not new. Southwest Oregon is going to be quite dry as well. So the RHs will only really start to kind of come back toward Monday. So starting really Tuesday and into Wednesday, let's brace ourselves for a little bit more heat. Here comes another pulse. So here's the indices for dry easterlies. We've got one on the left for the southern weather stations, and then one on the right for the northern weather stations. And generally the warmer the color, it goes from green to blue up to yellows and reds for warmer, is the higher potential for low humidity and potential east directional winds. And so just highlighting, you can just quickly see the yellow popping out on both of these charts. And just to give you an idea, it'd be nice to have these mapped, but one on the left shows the Illinois Valley Airport at a 66% chance. And then Tokatee in the Southern Cascades at about a 61% chance. And so I just kind of outlined where these kind of are. So the Illinois Valley Airport's near Cave Junction area. Tokatee is near Diamond Lake, just northeast of Crater Lakes. It kind of gives you an idea where that might register those higher values. And of course, there's a lot of other values in blue as well that are greater than 50% probability. And for the northern weather stations, we're looking at Tidewater at 63 starting about September 5th, which is Thursday. And then, but tomorrow we've got Log Creek. Tidewater is actually in Northwest Oregon, right in the chunk of Northwest Oregon, midway from about Highway 26 to Columbia River. And then Log Creek is one near Brightwood, west of Mount Hood. Yellowstone is south of Mill City, the Santiam drainage. Pebble is east of Highway 126 on the Cascade Crests, right before you hit the junction of Highway 20 and 22. And then Trout Creek is near Highway 126 near Vida east of Springfield. So the kind of the usual stations there, Pebble, Yellowstone, Trout Creek, a little bit higher probability. So just kind of zeroing in, I've been feathering these east winds charts in, but this gives you an idea. This is one of the heads up that we can keep our eyes open for this week. So our fuels, what are our fuels looking like? They're going to be baking again in the next few days, but you know, we've definitely come back into drought full force here. Moderate drought, some severe drought in Southern Oregon and the far southeast of the state. So we're dry and we're going to be warming up again. So we pretty quickly fell back into drought, and thanks to Chris Klein, Chief Klein, he was helping me understand a little bit more about the weather and fire potential. And so when we were looking at the drought maps at the beginning of July, end of June, we were grateful that we came out of drought. But I think from what I've discussed with Chris, we just barely came out of drought. And so it was easy to fall right back into it. So our National Fire Danger Rating System indices that give us an idea of fuel moistures and the potential for burning and how difficult it would be to control fires. We've seen a steep decline because of our benign weather systems in August, but we're still above average, and we're about average really for September, but the fuel moistures are still really low. Those systems that came through the state in August didn't affect our large fuel moistures as much as we would like. So we do have a little bit of a decreased energy release right now. In Northeast Oregon, it's come from extreme down to high just overnight, because I produced this slide, most of it yesterday. I checked it again this morning. But the main point now is that all districts are forecasted to rise again starting about Wednesday. So we're going to see an uptick in our indices and another downtick in our fuel moistures as we go through this latest heat pulse. So looking at the 6 to 10 day forecast, this one I grab a few days prior. And so this gives us what was forecasted for today through the rest of this week. So we are seeing that heat, and it's going to be gradually moving to the east, and then below normal temperatures as well. But as we look ahead again, we see that heat move to the east. And with the precip, I was a little bit surprised to see that above normal precipitation coming in. And the graphic on the far right is showing you the low pressure system that's building in Alaska. And we're hoping that comes right on down and we don't have a blocking high that will prevent it from giving us the moisture that we need. I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing this above normal precipitation next week, not this week. The monthly outlook shows not a strong signal for above normal temperatures for September for the west side of the state, but still elevated for the east side of the state. And the precip, again, we're looking forward to some systems coming in from Alaska. One of Pete Parsons' recent videos shows that the first part of September is going to be warmer and drier, and the last part of September might be a little bit more benign, a little bit more moist and cooler. Northwest Coordination Center is calling for moderate fire potential for today and most of tomorrow. Thursday, a little bit starts to elevate now. Thursday going into Friday and Saturday, and there's some potential for this Southern Oregon lightning and a mostly dry system that should be coming through. So I'm sure we're going to keep our eyes peeled on this potential. So we did have season slowing events in August, but fire season continues. The thunderstorms that were happening over the weekend are starting to wane and move out of Northeast Oregon. But high pressure returns Wednesday. We're going to have significant warming, drying, and low level instability west side too. Starting Friday and Saturday, we've got this thermal trough setting up, and that's bringing those thunderstorm activity coming across southern Oregon. And we're going to be starting to watch eagle eye on the east winds potential and that low humidity on the west side. And then deep troughing is building in Alaska as we go out further. And just reading up what National Weather Service in Pendleton is talking about in their forecast discussion, there's potential. There's some of the models are showing precip next Tuesday if we don't have a blocking high that keeps that precipitation offshore. But at least we might see some lower temperatures. So try to end that on a good note. Thank you for your time, and I'm available if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, TZA. That was a good report. Any questions or comments from committee members?
Just that it was a great report, TZA. Thank you.
Yeah, my take home is we're not out of fire season yet. But hopefully if we get through this week and the weekend, we might be able to not be so concerned about large fires at least. So thank you.
Yeah.
All right, that takes us to agenda item number 6, an update on the status of large fire cost collection efforts. Is Mr. Nairns on? I know he was joining us remotely. He also has a pitch hitter who's sitting in the back if he couldn't. Kyle is actually out on a fire assignment and was going to try to give his report, but maybe that cow pasture doesn't have the best internet service. So, all right, we have Mr. Holsbeck to give us a report. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. For the record, Tim Holzbach, Deputy Chief of Policy and Planning with the Protection Division here at ODF. So for cost recovery, it's continual work in progress, as we all know. Over the time of presenting to this committee, this form has gotten shorter, which is always helpful as well with it too. So there have been no new demands since the previous report. The department's continually engaged with the responsible parties, lawyers and insurance companies to try to work through the best pathway forward for recovery of suppression costs. So we'll continue to work through that. The payment plan section shows for received for the months of June and August through payment plans. We received about $6,600 over the course of that. A lot of those are generally a little bit of a slow progression on recovering those costs, but working with folks for their ability to pay for those. So there's also included in that 6,600 is a few small fires that are currently not on a payment plan that we've just received full payment for as well. Of note, the closed fire cost collection section, there's a few of them that we've been able to take off the board. So Pike Road is the first 2020 fire to our Labor Day fire from 2020 to come off the board with a settlement for $500,000. Neil Rock has been settled and the payment's been received. There's a potential that this may remain on for another section, and you can see the payment received. There are interest that gets collected with these between the invoicing period and when we receive the funds. So that's why you see on the form that there's a little bit more on the received side than on the billed side. Two other fires that are not on here because they were under 500 or 5,000 are Brush Creek. That was a South Cascade district that went through the small claims process for recovery of that, and also the Big Stump Beach fire. That was a West Oregon fire that went through restitution. So utilizing those two pathways, that recently the department retooled and updated its cost recovery policy and built some new tools to fully utilize their authorities, and the districts are taking advantage of those to get that money back into their budgets. So the bottom line, year to date for 2024, we received $2.3 million in recovery actions throughout the course of the year here. So as far as the investigation list, there is no new fires from the summer have been added to the report yet. That'll be updated in December to have the additions from 2024 as we make determinations for responsible parties and that type of stuff. But there have been some updates to the current status provided next to each of those. With that, I'll end a report pending any questions.
Any questions from committee members? No, I will say that I continue to very much appreciate the agency's focus on this and the good progress we've seen moving things along through the process. I recognize that that predates Kyle taking this over and some good processes put in place back then, and the ball is rolling, and that's encouraging to see. Thank you. Okay, unless there are any questions or comments from committee members regarding that, we will move on to agenda item number 7 regarding the guidelines for eligibility of firefighting costs. This is an information and a decision item. You know, as I mentioned in my opening comments, I'm pleased that we have made it this far and that we have a draft policy package for the committee to review today. I think this is a crucial step in advancing MGO's recommendations as it seeks to streamline what was a complex set of standards, policies, etc., by reducing what was a 31-page policy that, in my humble opinion, was kind of ad hoc over the years as the agency and firefighting changed and grew, now to just a very clean 8-page document that demonstrates what is and is not eligible. I also want the committee to know that to ensure that this process has been transparent, and I tend to live by the rule of no surprises. We have been communicating with key leadership. Nancy and I both, along with ODF leadership, who has been engaged, has been in contact with the Legislative Fiscal Office and the Legislative Revenue Office to discuss these draft concepts. And I've also reached out to Board of Forestry Chair Kelly to notify him. With that, Nancy, can you provide an overview of the draft eligibility policy? And please, if you would, add any additional color regarding any feedback from employees. If you could lead us through what the draft administration rule changes would be and any estimated fiscal impacts. And I would appreciate if you summed it up with a recommendation.
Sounds good. Good morning. I'm Nancy Hirsch. I'm the Emergency Fire Costs Committee Administrator. Obviously, Brennan's outlined several topics for me to provide an overview on. There's actually 4 documents in the meeting material, staff report, and then really 2 attachments. A third one is kind of a repeat without track changes. So I'm going to skip over here the refresh, as I think Brennan has covered what occurred in June and why we're here today. He's also highlighted the makeup of the work group, so I'm going to skip over that. We did meet 4 times. Fortunately, 3 of those were before the hit hard part of July, when fire season really went to town. That enabled us to really do the legwork, kind of pull up our sleeves, and since then, primarily just checked in here with the work group before we brought this back to the committee. The principles that guided our work are also in your staff report on page 1. And the first document I'm going to present basically an overview of is the eligibility policy, which is attachment A. And I'm only going to be providing highlights. So with this policy, it eliminates the need to track type 3 fires for eligibility. It eliminates the need to track in fire season versus out of fire season and dispatch card requirements related to resources responding. All statistical and approved threat fires as defined are emergency fire cost eligible. Resource orders will now be required for all resources for EFC, emergency fire cost eligibility. So again, many of these bullets are decomplexing a significant amount of tracking. This proposal moves district budgeted operational personnel, equipment, and support costs to emergency fire costs. This is likely the largest shift from district to emergency fire costs. This is also one of the changes that will help better account for the true cost of fire. This changes requirement where certain administrative and management overtime was previously paid for by the emergency fire costs to now district or statewide funding, or to now district or state or a statewide funding source, excluding the Oregon Forest Land Protection Fund, for in-district personnel on in-district fires. Repair work must be documented in an approved incident action plan or repair plan. The acreage deductible was maintained. The daily deductible shifts to an incentive. So instead of districts paying the first or up to the first $25,000, these costs move to the Emergency Fire Costs Committee. If the emergency fire costs exceed $25,000, then the district pays. So you can see the difference in that incentive model. Proposal eliminates the helicopter deductible and adds a new helicopter credit, basically an incentive. It's a benefit to the entire state when a district has a contracted helicopter. We also proposing the policy would go into effect on January 1st, 2025. So again, just want to highlight that these are big ticket items that really decomplex many business processes and coding when it comes down to hundreds and thousands of employees. Initial feedback we had on the proposed changes, we met early last week with leadership and staff from districts and associations across the state. We had about 50 people that were able to attend. The feedback initially that we heard are along these lines. First and foremost, there was a lot of appreciation for the work to modernize the standards, and many of the questions were clarifying in nature. There were some questions and concerns about trainees on type 3 fires not being eligible. I would just note that's consistent with the current standards. We were reaffirmed the process for approving threat fires through an email or phone call to the Emergency Fire Cost Committee Administrator and following that up with documentation to file. Some concern remains, especially on high fire districts, with administrative and management overtime being paid for by districts. We do have a follow-up meeting. I'm not certain that it's been scheduled yet. We have some fiscal analysis that we weren't able to necessarily dive into initially, and we're going to be hosting a meeting back with district foresters and district managers to walk them through that more specifically. We also have a proposal surrounding the repair definition, and we also recognize that there's probably some further work that where we need to add in some more examples, and further down the road when this comes back to you, presumably, that's when you would see that cleaned up a little more. We had some feedback for the 25,000 per day language that it was confusing, and we also received a recommendation to do a 5-year analysis. We've already improved the language in the version that you have, and we do have a plan to do further analysis on the 5 years. We also included a clarification on the helicopter credit when more than one district association funds it. and when the claim doesn't exceed the credit. So those were some questions we received, and those are already addressed in your attachment A. And last one, continue to have some feedback recommendations to include deputy agency administrators to be funded. And this topic is continuing to be discussed with the Department of Forestry leadership. So we will continue to provide further feedback as we receive it, or it will be reflected in the event we bring this back to you in a final form. So shifting gears, I'm next going to talk about the proposed rule modifications to Chapter 629, Division 165. Again, your attachment B shows those changes in track change, and attachment C shows the clean version. In summary, the proposed amended administrative rules serve to clarify the definitions, essentially redefining emergency fire and emergency fire costs. And we're also adding the definitions into rule for statistical and threat fires. Prior complex examples of emergency fires under the old rule set are eliminated. The $25,000 per day per fire deductible has been shifted to an incentive model that aligns with the current department operational approach. And lastly, there's one housekeeping edit to improve clarity related to a reference document. So next, I wanted to highlight basically an estimated fiscal impact on the proposed rule modifications. So this would be part of the rule process in the event the committee moves on this. So this proposal addresses the recommendations made to the Oregon Department of Forestry by MGO, an independent third-party contractor that reviewed ODF's financial processes. The proposed amended administrative rules ensure the true cost of wildland suppression costs are accurately accounted for, tracked, reported, and paid for at the statewide level. Previously, an average of about 3.2 million of wildfire suppression costs were embedded in readiness paid for by private and public landowners and general fund at the local level. This proposal simply moves these costs to private and some public landowners and general fund at the statewide level, where the rest of these costs are already being accounted for. A portion of the costs that are general fund are simply moving from being paid for through the biennial budget to emergency fire cost funding. The cost move does not increase any Oregon Forest Land Protection Fund revenue fees. This change results in increased certainty in district readiness budgeting and expenditures at the local level, and improved certainty in the Department of Forestry's fiscal year fire budgets. So with that, I'd like to put on the record, obviously for you all to have discussion, but my recommendation is that the Emergency Fire Cost Committee direct the Emergency Fire Cost Administrator to proceed with the public hearing process and return in November to a special Emergency Fire Cost Committee meeting with the final rule language for Chapter 629, Division 165.
Before we get to a motion, I do want to open up if there is anything that any ODF staff would like to bring forward.
I got that. Yep. James Short, Chief Financial Officer for the Department of Forestry. The agency supports these new eligibility guidelines and thanks to work group for their excellent work. These new guidelines continue the implementation of the MGO recommendations and brings in the alignment of the biennial budget and supports moving forward.
Excellent. Thank you. Any comments or questions from committee members? Okay. Can I have a motion, please, to approve the recommendation as presented?
I would love to make that motion. I've thoroughly read the proposed rules. I found some English that I didn't agree with and some clarity that I will provide comments on. I think that the meetings that Nancy mentioned that need to continue should take place with the staff and the district foresters as part of the ongoing rulemaking process. I therefore would like to move that the Emergency Fire Cost Committee direct the Emergency Fire Cost Committee Administrator to proceed with the public hearing process and return in November with the final rule language for Chapter 629, Division 165, in addition to holding the meetings that the Emergency Fire Costs Committee Administrator mentioned with forestry staff.
That's an excellent motion. I'm not going to be able to repeat it all, but I will ask committee members to make sure that they fully understood the motion.
Yes, understood.
Okay, Chris? Okay, very good. Can I get a second to that motion, please?
Go ahead. I'll second the motion.
Okay, all those in favor will reply with aye.
Aye.
Did we get an aye from Chris? I'm sorry. See a thumbs up. We'll accept that. There are none opposed. The motion carries to continue to move forward as presented in the motion. Okay. All right. That takes us to agenda item number 8. The Agency and Business Services Division report. I see I see that State Forester Mukomoto is maybe with us, maybe focused on other things. Oh, hi, Cal.
Yeah, I think James is prepared to report on
All right.
that. But I just wanted to let you know that I'm really happy with the move you made on decomplexifying our financial situation. Good job. And I'll let James take over from here. James, are you going to be able to report?
Yes, Cal, I'll be able to report.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So James Short, once again, ODF Chief Financial Officer for the record, and I'll be covering the first bullet point, agency financials. So as the agency entered into the the fire season, cash and general fund available on July 1st, we had $87.3 million in available resources. As we've moved through this fire season, as of August 30th, the agency has $27.4 million in available resources for this fire season. Consistent with the past seasons, ODF is working closely with the Chief Financial Office, Legislative Fiscal Office, and the Governor's Office and the legislature to ensure we will meet our financial obligations and ensure agency solvency. So what are we doing to meet that? We're looking for, in the next 120 days, we have about $176 million of disbursements that are going to be paid out. We've paid out currently $34.4 million for large fire costs this year. And in addition, in that 120 days, our standard operating costs in a sum roughly run $20 million, so $5 million a month. So we are working closely with those named offices and the legislature to implement a financial strategy that ensures the agency's financial solvency, which includes paying our firefighters and vendors. This is a 3-point plan. In the immediate term, we are considering various financial strategies that we have used successfully deployed in the past, such as working cooperatively with our federal partners to delay appropriate payments, working with other state agencies on administrative cash flow management options, and requesting FEMA cash advances, but the revenue potential is likely 6 months out. ODF has requested $47 million from the emergency board in September In preparation for the December emergency board, we will continue to deploy and adjust our financial strategies as needed to inform a December emergency board request. It is likely that the additional funding will be requested through an early legislative session budget bill to carry the agency's wildfire costs for the remainder of the biennium. And so, end of report. And I believe Tracy Rolson is on for the next 3 bullet points.
Take it away.
Right. Thank you, Chair Bren. Tracy Rolson, ODF Protection Finance Unit Leader or a Manager, sorry. Start with strategic investments for the Oregon Forest Land Protection Fund. Currently, for the 2020 investments, beginning balance was $1,504,959. Up to this point through June 30th, the dollar amount spent is $599,237 for a remaining project balance of $862,762. In the handouts for this meeting, you will see the detail per project, from detection cameras to guard stations to trailers to all of that was approved as part of the projects. Still have an undistributed fund amount of $57,376. And progress report has also been updated, which is in your handout also for each one of these projects, provided by each area that has a project on the books. Movement is being made, and obviously with fire season the way it is, a delay obviously and continued, but at the fall we're looking at picking up speed on these once again to implement the projects in totality. I'll pause there for any questions on strategic investments.
I just have a general question, and that is, we made a lot of strategic investments east of the Cascades. Were we able to use any of those in this unfortunate fire year that we've had?
Go ahead, Brian.
Tracy, you could probably answer it all and jump in. Good morning, folks. I'm Brian Pugh. I'm the area director for Eastern Oregon. Thanks for the question. It has been an amazing fire year, and we're busy this morning. I'm looking at the list and want to thank the committee for those allocations of funds. And if I could take a minute to answer the question, we have a lot of success stories on there. If I look at I'll start from the bottom of the list. On the Central Oregon grapple dozer, which is out of Prineville, we've used that several times. I'm sure it's on a fire this morning, pushing line. So appreciate that, and got that early this spring and is in use there. The other item number 5, which is the EOA type 3 trailers, they're communication trailers. We've used those several times. One's being used on Shoe Fly this morning out of Central Oregon. Northeast Oregon's used those on Town Gulch and several other fires. I apologize. We've got so many fire names in my head, I can't keep them all straight. Winding Waters was the one I was thinking of too. And then for Klamath, Lakeview, they're using their comm trailers actually at a heli base, which helps effectively use the severity helicopters better on there. So good news there. I'm still looking at the list. Couple of things to note. We've got cameras in motion. I think it's fair to say, I'll echo what Tracy said, we slowed down a little bit because our comm techs have been on fires and not putting up cameras. But this committee also gave a lot of funding to cameras that have been up, that have detected fires. So we've got success in cameras that were put up previously. The Chillican Guard Station, we've been using that all year, housing firefighters there, which is good for them as from a lodging perspective, but good for the whole system. They're closer to the fire and ready to respond. So yes, when I think about Eastern Oregon, and I think you all are probably with me on this, we've burned unfortunately a lot of acres and spent a lot of money. What doesn't get told, and will this winter, we've had a lot of success at IA. We've stopped a lot of fires, partly because of this equipment, partly because of the system as a whole with the landowners and the cooperators and the association. So lots of good work. And without this investment, it would have been more fire on the landscape for sure. So I want to thank you, the committee, for that. I'll pause there and turn it back to Tracy.
Tracy, before you take off, on a different topic, Brian, I appreciate that. And my ask, from this committee would be that perhaps for our, our January or our March meeting, the committee would love to see some written success stories of these. I don't want to overburden, the agency or the staff to do that, but, some of the things you highlight to be able to put those on paper so that we can share how the system works, with those who really need to hear that message, would be greatly beneficial. High level is really all we need, and some data points on the successes because of the investments that have been made. I would appreciate it.
You bet. That's a good ask for sure. And it also gives us an opportunity to share our successes and talk about the good IA and not just the large fire. So thank you. We'll have that ready for the January meeting. So thank you.
Yeah, and I asked because I thought I saw some of the comms trucks and pictures on various fires. And so that's the reason why I asked, but I am very pleased that our investment in those severity resources assisted with this most difficult fire year, folks. Thank you.
Yeah, and furthermore on that, Tracy, I mean, we see on the list here, significant investment in Eastern Oregon. But I would like to extend that beyond just Eastern Oregon, to be clear, and look at the whole list of the SI funds.
You bet. We'll get to work on that, and I'll send gentle reminders out for folks to get some kind of success stories in place. So appreciate that. And also, we continue to strive to implement these as quickly as possible. Obviously, as we stated, with the fire season the way it is, people need to recoup a little bit, but we don't want these dollars floating out there for years and years and years, and we'll try to spend these appropriately with these projects as fast as we can.
Yeah, that's spot on. I looked at the committee for their input, but even the March meeting is fine. I want people to take the time they need after this season to rest and recuperate. I don't want to burden them with a compressed time schedule for this.
We appreciate that. Thank you. All right, on to severity. So additional handouts as you have in front of you, severity budget. Brandon, just go around. I tried to make it a little more readable instead of that really small print the last time. So a high level on this, severity had a $13.5 million budget this year. And currently our gross severity expenditures are at 16.4 million with the amount of helicopters that are flying around on the fires this year. With that said, though, our cost recovery is tremendous this year compared to normal. We're about a 54% cost recovery because of all the fires that it's flown on. So that's a savings to the budget. So currently our net severity expenditures are sitting at about $7.6 million for this fire season. You'll also see in your handout a detail per ship and per grouping of manager or on the ground or heli-tac resources that are implemented as part of this budget also, giving you a breakdown of those numbers. Grand scheme, the summary down at the bottom, being that we're at 7.6 million, the OFLPF 60% and general fund 40% match. It has been spent already. So OFLPF has gone through their $3 million. And the remainder of that is part of James' request, as he stated, dealing with the request from general fund for the remainder of those dollars. But as Brandon, you stated earlier on, fire season is not over yet. We have helicopters that are still on contract, employees that are still employed yet, obviously. So severity will see more expenditures as the fire season continues and progresses. Pause there for any severity questions. All right, hearing none. The last topic here is dealing with our FEMA reimbursements. So again, you'll see a handout that's a high level per fire year of outstanding FEMA claims. And then the second page of that is a little more detail per incident of what we're expecting to receive for FEMA claims. So the grand scheme of it from 2019 to 22, a large majority of those fires have been wrapped up as far as FEMA and public assistance claims through OEM. We have a remainder balance a little bit in 2020, approximately 2.3 million suppression claims to still receive. And we anticipate receiving those hopefully within the next, I would say, 6 months tops. Just a little cleanup work there to do on a few cost shares that are finishing up there also. The remainder of those years, though, are just our admin claims. So that's all the work that's done in the background to perform and implement the auditing and the claim work. So small dollars there to collect ultimately in the end. Fast forward to 23, that's Golden Fire down in Klamath Lake. That one work is continually in process yet with auditing, making sure we're accurate before we can submit a claim to FEMA. And then 2024 is an estimated where we're currently standing of approximately $57 million that will go through the audit process for this fire season. Obviously, none of that work has started yet, besides making sure payroll is as clean as it can be up to this point for FEMA claims. With that said, what is not on this as a fire is the new fire, Copperfield down in Klamath that just started a few days ago, which is FEMA eligible. So I would anticipate another probably $3-4 million added on to this total for 2024 for FEMA. Questions on FEMA?
No questions.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, James. Let's look, I will look to either Mr. Williams or Mr. Mokomoto for any updates that the agency wants to provide to the committee.
Thank you, Chair Gorels. For the record, Kyle Williams, Deputy Director, Fire Operations, Department of Forestry. And Cal, I'll hand it over to you, close out here in just a second. Just a couple. So obviously, agency's a bit busy at the moment. Lots of fire. Ron will get into a fire season recap and let you know what's going on this week. But we've got a lot of other stuff going on still in our other divisions, right? Through the summer and important work. We're prepping this week for a Board of Forestry meeting that'll take place tomorrow and Thursday with a couple of pretty significant topics on the agenda, right? Tim's going to chat about some hazard map stuff. You may have heard of that little project. And it's got quite a bit of workload for our staff that has been ongoing this summer, and want to give Tim and the pair of Dereks, Derek Wheeler and Derek Gasparini, a huge shout out for the work they've done to this point through the summer on that hazard map. It's been really impressive. We have got some post-disturbance rulemaking that our Forest Resources Division staff have been working hard on. That's going to be in front of the board and still in progress of where that's going to ultimately end up, that conversation. And then several other topics on the agenda related to our state forests workload. And so just the general message that while fire season is all consuming for many components of this agency, our daily business, has to keep going. And then on top of that daily business, there's some significant projects and workload that are in process. And just a huge shout out to the staff of this agency for frankly keeping the lights on while everything's happening, but also making sure that it's a quality product and that Oregonians are being taken care of across the full suite of things that this agency provides. And so I think those are the highlights for right now. Brennan, you mentioned the wildfire funding work group ongoing project as well through the summer. And you can imagine just the escalated importance that that task is taken given the fire season that we've had, right? James mentioned numbers over 200 million that the agency is responsible to cash flow this summer. And the importance of being able to provide long-term solutions for that challenge is the task of that group. It is a challenge though, because there's, as you mentioned, 35 people in the room on varying scales of understanding, perspective, and organizing all of that into a direction is a challenge, especially in a short, compressed time frame. And so we're making progress on that front. The next full work group, we've had several subgroup meetings and continue to, and the next full work group will meet in October in Pendleton. And then another meeting in November, preparing for a report from the agencies in December that will provide our initial recommendations to the legislature. So that's where that process is at. Lots of other things happening, but in the essence of time, I'll wrap it up and see if Cal's got anything to tie off with. But just want to say thanks again to Nancy, Brennan, your work group, the FCC eligibility workload through the summer while all that other stuff was happening. Definitely appreciate that. And the effort and intention to try and make life easier for staff here at ODF is greatly appreciated. So with that, Cal, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, I don't have much to add. You covered it very well. I do want to add one more thing is that I think this year's cooperation among all the agencies has been excellent in the communications. And so it kind of parallels the complete and coordinated system that we have more locally with the federal agencies and other state agencies. OSFM has been a great partner this summer. And as Kyle says, you know, as we're doing this, we continue to do other work, and things are making move on. The WUI map, PFA, state forests, all that work needs to continue in order so we can advance forestry in Oregon. So I just want to lay out my big thanks to EFCC again for all the work you guys do, all the contributions you're making, and thank you for simplifying our lives just a little bit more today. So I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Cal, and thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Cal, for the report. Any questions or comments from committee members before we move on? Okay, I have one go back to clean up the record on agenda item 7. I mistakenly said that we had met with Legislative Revenue Office. That was incorrect. It was actually the DAS CFO that we met. Okay, let's take it to agenda item number 9, the Protection Division report. Mr. Graham, floor is yours.
Good morning, Chair Greltz, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Ron Graham. I serve as the Deputy Chief of Operations in the Fire Protection Division. Give you a little bit of a snapshot of the update for the fire season that the Board of Forestry will formally get tomorrow. So as you've heard, things took a pretty good shift over the weekend after about a week or two of a little temporary reprieve from what has already been a really dynamic, challenging fire season. With 2 team deployments over the weekend in the last 48 hours, it's pretty much ramped our system back up to the point of we're employing some measures that we had to use several weeks ago in July when all of this started. Working closely with our compact partners through the Northwest Compact, those states that we have state agreements with, as well as working through the National Association of State Foresters to get needed resources. That was really successful when we were at PL5 and activity level 5. We brought in over 500 individual resources to help us out, which was really significant at a time where there was basically none. So 500 versus none was substantial. The system that NASF, the National Association of State Foresters, has put in place with their fire director and the other directors from the western region, the southern region, and the northeast region was a daily call. It's shifted now to 3 days a week, but that is a check-in call, effectively accessing all the states to be able to help prioritize resources. And for much of the time, Washington and Oregon were that priority. We shifted to Idaho for a little bit, and I think we're going to shift back to Oregon here this week on the call. So we've been working with those folks already. Blake Ellis would have been in here as well, but he's actively working that system with the Salem Coordination Center, especially to try to get resources for both Copperfield and Shoofly to support our teams there, as well as to help out our other partners on the other fires that took off over the weekend. So I'll get into that. And like I said, really just going to give you a snapshot of what we'll be presenting at the board. And we plan to talk about, what was the fire season outlook when we started fire season. And if you kind of remember, it was, should be kind of an average start to fire season. And there wasn't crazy predictions of anything getting too out of hand. And as you know, quickly that changed. Throw in a little bit of heat and lightning, and magically you have all the right ingredients for kind of a terrible July fire season. Kicked off with Salt Creek and then Larch Creek. So we went through that and that lightning event and that heat, really starting around 4th of July, kicked all of that off and started widespread fires throughout the state. Eastern Oregon area, unfortunately, was really a recipient of a lot of those new fire starts on all ownerships affected in Eastern Oregon. That ultimately has led to 11 FEMA fires now, with Copperfield added to that list of growing FEMA fires. That's substantially more than we've seen in recent years, only second to 2020 at this point in time. So fairly substantial, and you've heard about the outstanding claims there, as well as I think Tracy Rolson quoted us last week around 500,000 in pre-positioning claims due to the use of severity resources on those FEMA fires as well. It's been a real challenging season. Tim has navigated that very well with the FEMA region, and they've been very responsive as several of those fires merged together and combined and all of that. It gets a little tricky with FEMA rules, but again, they've been excellent. We'll talk about our current success rate, where we stand at successfully suppressing fires at 10 acres or less. Given the situation, 94% currently is not too bad. Real close to our average of 95, almost 96. So we're looking pretty good in a year where we're seeing kind of the typical statistics, ODF protection versus statewide. Right now, we're sitting at just about 50% of the fires occurred on ODF protection, with a little disclaimer. This is the first year that when a west side ODF protection of BLM lands is not classified as a stat fire any longer for ODF. It's a stat fire under BLM if the point of origin is on BLM. So that's a little shift and change of how we're doing business. Effectively reduces our stat fire numbers a little bit, and this will be the first year to start tracking how that impacts those shift to non-stat. We'll see more impacted acres as a result of that, and we'll be tracking that closely. So statewide, again, about half the fires. And when you look at our approaching 200,000 acres of ODF direct protection burn to the 1.5 million statewide, it's considerably lower percentage of our acres burned. That's typically what we see on average year in, year out. Then we'll talk a little bit about, how does this fire season compare in terms of acres burned recently? So within the last 5 years, 2020 was the highest, 2021 still number 2, and 2024 shaping up to be number 3 on the list as far as acres burned. So a substantial season, and we're not out of it yet, as we just heard that perhaps Shoofly is about 20,000 acres today, and Copperfield around 3,600. So they're still growing, not over with yet. And that's pretty consistent now. Again, looking at our acres burned by decade and how that average is jumping up, and we're going to be well over 125,000 average acres burned with this fire season. Probably quite a bit higher than that when you average it in 2024 at the end of all this. Similar scene across all jurisdictions, as you just heard, 1.5 million acres statewide. So we're seeing that. We'll talk about our IMT deployments. Our teams have had a busy year. These are the type of years that test our team members, our incident commanders, our agency, our other divisions, programs that support those, and our families back home. So we've had Salt Creek, Larch Creek, the Battle Mountain Complex, Lane 1, where we had to bring in a North Carolina team to supplement when we had all of our teams out. And then again, run another ODF team through that fire. Winding Waters, Dixon, now Copperfield and Shoofly to round out our team deployments. So a substantial year for team deployments as well. Ultimately, we'd really love to see each team exercised once a year. That would be ideal. That's well beyond that, as most of them have been out 2 to 3 times a year now. So we'll talk about those, and then we'll talk a little bit about, of course, this Labor Day event that we've had with the warm weather, the lightning, notably the Copperfield and the Shoofly. Shoofly in Central Oregon, Copperfield down in Klamath Lake, Copperfield being a FEMA fire. We will also talk about initial attack success, because that 94% success rate of the 700 fires is still pretty substantial. We'll talk about the Parish Creek Complex in John Day. That could have been another large fire on the landscape, but really good work keeping that in check. And that was 2 fires, the Wild Horse and Indian Hollow fires, and they were both right around 100-acre fires, and that could have been substantial. But really good work with really challenging logistics to get to these fires. They were pretty remote, long drive times to get to them and access them with resources. And we utilized several of our out-of-state partners, especially some Alaska strike teams in the severity program on that to help with that. And then also the Silver Falls fire in the West Oregon district was another one that severity aircraft played a big part in. Our fire bosses were substantially used there. The small single engine scoopers, as they're called now, played a big part in that. And then I would also mention the Lee Falls fire in Northwest Oregon up out of Forest Grove near Hag Lake. That had a lot of potential. We had some really good drone pictures of that fire afterwards. And when we show those, you can really see the potential of what that could have been for Northwest Oregon as well. Cal mentioned, State Forester Mukamoto mentioned, great state partners. Another one this year has been the Oregon Military Department and the National Guard. Their medevac aircraft had been deployed for 60 days straight. 2 medevac aircraft located throughout the state to support operations. That's a substantial contribution from them alone. And then 7 20-person hand crews deployed between the Falls and the Diamond complex as well. So great showing by the National Guard. They were great partners in addition to those other ones mentioned already. We touch on the severity program, and you kind of heard where Tracy Rolson mentioned as far as severity program cost and the good cost recovery we've had. We're already over basically our 10-year average in flight hours for the program as of last week. So we'll be substantially higher. A lot of product delivered between water enhancing, retardant foams, you name it. In a very challenging dynamic, as you've heard, the gross cost over 16 million. We initially set up working contract cost estimates over 13 million with a $10 million allocation. But that 54% recovery has been pretty good this year. Again, between FEMA supporting our partners, you name it, keeping those fires small on neighboring jurisdictions. Our multi-mission aircraft, we'll touch on that, a little bit down in the number of detections this year at 22, mostly because of mechanical issues. We hit 100 hours mandatory mechanical inspections and found a few more ongoing issues with the part Navia. Real challenges, foreign made airframe that's getting quite older, and availability of parts when these things are found is really challenging the sustainability of that aircraft. So more to come from us in the future on discussions on aircraft, but we've tried to procure other aircraft. We've had some success with between other states, contractual. We utilized a partnership with Washington DNR, where Washington DNR was without an observer. We were without a plane. We married things up together to work together, provided the observer to them. They provided the aircraft, and we did some missions that way. So we've had some success. And then, large fire costs, you've kind of heard about all of that. We'll talk about that and where we're at with the fire costs. And then we'll touch on a little bit of safety. It's been a pretty good season overall. There were a few incidents early on. We were challenged a little bit in Eastern Oregon with the fire siege that happened there. But overall through August, pretty good right now. Our number of reported injuries is down substantially at right now, lower than any of the past 5 years. So that's good. Little uptick. A lot of the injuries involved contractors. We have to look at that a little bit more and kind of see if there are any trends to pull out of those. Early on, it was a lot of heat related. There's been the typical slips, strains, sprains, stings, all that kind of stuff. But fortunately, nothing real critical in terms of injuries. We'll talk about that little reprieve we got in the weather a week or two ago and what it's done. And then we'll close out looking ahead. Some of the things that TZA mentioned with the current weather right now, when we typically maybe see some downturn in the weather and start talking about season-ending events and how we close out this fire season in our complete and coordinated system. So that's what we'll be updating the Board of Forestry on tomorrow. Any questions?
I do have one question. It's a bit in the weeds, but over the last decade, perhaps, teams, incidents have been struggling with filling those middle management overhead positions. And I know ODF has made a concerted effort to help build that capacity, and for those listening, I'm really talking about those single resource bosses, those strike team leaders, task force leaders. Have you seen any reprieve of that crunch yet? Granted, this is also another historic season where the system is completely tapped, and that may not be a season that we planned for. Well, time will tell what the average is, but
yeah.
Can you shed any light on that?
Yeah, I can. So a couple things. One, use of trainees has been really high this year. A little bit to the point of some of our partnering agencies had so many trainees assigned, we had to question, shouldn't they be used in qualified positions that we have critical shortages in if they're qualified in some of those? You have to kind of balance out trainee needs, succession management, and current needs. Two, at some points in time through most of July into August, we were seeing that middle management overhead numbers of unable to fill nationally up in the 500 range. So that's the flip side of not so good. It continues to be a trend nationally, everything from heavy equipment bosses up through division supervisors. Anything single resource, including team overhead, just remains in critical shortages nationally.
Thanks.
All right, if there aren't any more questions, I'll give you a real brief BLM agreement update. Kyle might jump in there. A little bit on GeoBoard, and unless there's anybody else from the field that has any strategic investment project updates, probably covered that pretty thoroughly already. So the BLM agreement went into effect July 1st. It's been a challenging year for that. I don't even think we know all the challenges that have come out of that yet, but it should lead to a really good AAR this offseason to start untangling those new business practices we employed, like I mentioned, being able to access and record a stat fire on BLM land when the point of origin was there. Some of the changes in the financial tracking and mechanisms we're doing and cost shares. I can honestly say I'm sure we don't even know all of the issues that came out. As you recall, the agreement took a while to get that implemented and was signed just before this whole fire season started, much like it did in 2018 or 19 when we had Klamathon and the new agreement back then. So not a lot of time to train, communicate, talk through implementation. It was that implementing new stuff, trial by fire, battlefield implementation, which, as you know, isn't ideal. So I'm sure we'll get a lot of feedback. There'll be a lot of lessons learned. And a lot of folks, did the very best they could given a very complex situation. So more to come there. Kyle, did you want to add anything on BLM? GeoBoard, our GeoBoard has been in a little bit of a hiatus here the last couple of months, just due to all of the team deployments We haven't had much time to meet as a board. Of course, we'll be picking that up. We've got to do a little restructuring with recent promotions, retirements, things like that. For example, current vice chair was Matt Howard, and Matt's retired from ODF, but working back as an incident commander. And then other changes in some of the other programs and divisions leadership has led to us having to restructure and scale back the geo board a little bit. We were meeting monthly. We're going to kind of go back to maybe a quarterly meeting. We still have an aggressive work plan with our succession management project, that living succession management project ongoing. The next big meeting we'll have with the geo board will be in December when we hear report outs from the incident commanders on how the fire season went from a team perspective. I would mention that in accordance with a lot of the changes that we have going on, such as police and fire and other updates that we've done, we're going to start incident management team recruitment probably here in September, with a goal of having some primary draft rosters completed for January. And then obviously have to go through a few follow-up recruitments to fill in all of the holes, but that's quite a bit quicker than we've done it in the past, and we have to kind of do it that way now. And then also, in a related note, there's an upcoming fall SIMC session. I believe it might be down in Arizona. And we won't be sending a full team, but probably 3/4 worth of a team of potential folks going that'll supplement other teams that are short a person or so. And then the next time FEMA or SIMC rolls back around in our neck of the woods, we'll be probably supplying a full team. But when it's not in the immediate area, we tend to put individual team people out there and supplement those others. So I think Blake's working with the areas, working with the incident commanders, and we submitted some names last week to get into that next round of the complex incident management course, help sustain our team members. Any questions on either BLM or GeoBoard?
With the BLM agreement, any flavor of the conversations that have taken place this season, recognizing what you described of battlefield implementation?
Actually, I think mostly positive. Centered around just sort of the finance procurement, who's on first when, paying agent versus not paying agent. How do we implement the language in the agreement? I think a lot of learning, especially on Salt Creek, right? To Ron's point, we signed that agreement June 30th and Salt Creek launched on July 7th. So there's some learning that we can manage through for that. The other ones are really actually, to Ron's point, processes that are going to help us be more successful across the board, specifically kind of some dispatch, the implementation of the new FireWeb technology. I think we rolled that out in several dispatch centers and didn't get to follow up with what would have been nice to have for a month of here's how you do it. Here's the boxes we all need to check. And so it's kind of little things like that, right? We missed a box to check there and we'll make that happen. Here's things we learned and the developer of FireWeb can help us build in, for success in subsequent fire seasons. Operationally, I'm not hearing anything operationally. In fact, mostly really successful. Lane 1 was an awesome opportunity for our folks to be able to go prove it, I think. And everything I heard out of that, BLM was very happy with the service we provided. The finance package, right? Pulling that fire apart, there was 8 fires that turned into 3 fires that turned into 1 fire. I don't even know what that looks like at the moment, but operationally, a ton of really positive feedback so far.
Excellent. Thanks for that answer. And for the record, just a good reminder that FireWeb was a strategic investment from this committee. And also a shout out to the Douglas Forest Protective Association, who started beta testing that earlier before the SI request. That their leadership and looking for those things led all the way to a good implementation that is working among the agencies. between the agencies, I should say. Okay, any other questions or comments from committee members regarding the Protection Division report?
I would just like to give a heartfelt thank you to all of the hard work that the Protection Division has done this year. And your coordination with the local officials and the information that you put out to the folks affected by the fire. I've been tracking all that closely, and I'm very proud of the work that the agency has done. And it's been difficult. I know that, but I feel that I see some issues that I think that we could improve. I'll have a chat with you guys later about those. But I'm proud to work with you all. You're hardworking, dedicated, caring individuals that come together into a really solid working team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ryan, I
I
see.
appreciate that.
Ryan, your hand is up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Geralds. If we have a minute, I've got one more strategic investment update the committee on. Didn't quite fit in the last time when I was speaking.
Oh, by all means, I love these updates. Floor is
Great.
yours.
Thank you. One clarification as I was looking at the spreadsheet, this confused me this morning, so maybe I'm not the only one, but we were talking about the Eastern Oregon communication trailers, and on the master spreadsheet it says in progress. Again, I want to say we're using those trailers. They've been in use. All the bills haven't been in, so when we see that in progress on the status, that's what we're doing, is finalizing those bills. So that's a good story. The other one, more successful story, I wanted to share, I couldn't leave without, and I'm gonna Teresa's hosting a fire. Rob's in briefing a team, so they're busy this morning, but Teresa wanted me to share some pictures of the Bly Guard Station. So I'm gonna try this. I'll give it a second, but if you can see my screen, that'd be great.
You're not sharing yet.
Okay, I'll try it one more time.
There we go.
Okay, so you all are looking at the Bly Guard Station. And the committee allocated $300,000 for the build out of this, and we have not spent that money yet. The landowner has fronted the money and has built this. That's the view. This is the view looking out. We're getting ready to put in a helicopter pad and some other improvements there to start using it next year. Our agreement, the ODF agreement with the landowner, will be signed within the month. So again, the landowner is putting a lot of investment in there. And then the strategic investment money of $300,000 will be spent in there. So really good success. We hope to be in there. Sounds like next October it'll be finished. So it'll be 26 by the time we get in there. But good progress so far, and I wanted to share that with folks.
Awesome. Thank you. That was another feather in the cap of ODF's ability to think outside the box, come up with creative solutions that all lead towards success. And I appreciate that. It's good to see those photos, the development and the continued progress towards that. Thank you.
Good. And I think if I did that right, I've stopped sharing, and that's all the report I have unless there's questions.
Well, we can definitely still see your screen, so we're careful where you navigate to next. We'll let you sort that out of stop sharing and close out agenda item number 9. Before we move to agenda item number 10, which is the EFCC Administrator Report, I want to give notice to the public who's listening that after this report, it will be public comment. Feel free, even at this time during the administrator report, to use the raise hand function or enter a question into the chat if you wish to speak at that time. So with that, Nancy.
Good morning again, Nancy Hirsch, Emergency Fire Cost Committee Administrator. Lorna mentioned, I think in one of her reports, we still have that open insurance claim from fire season 21. Little things kind of, we keep saying there's two things left. The two things have changed, two different fires. Looks like we might be getting some recovery, so we're kind of just holding out to the last minute. If ODF wants to push hard on it, there's, I don't know, $2 to $3 million left to be had there. But like Lorna said, we hope to get that closed out in a month or so. To be determined. Lastly, appreciate the committee's support to continue the policy work. We'll look forward to the public hearing process, and again, we'll emphasize, we will definitely continue the conversations with districts and association employees, their leadership, and hope to bring a solid product that we can hopefully share that it's supported statewide, along with that final draft rule language in what is to be a November 6th, I think is the date that, November 6th is the date that Brennan and I recently chose. And so we'll be getting that calendar invite out shortly after this meeting or by the end of the week to make sure you have that on hold. So otherwise, into my report, we'll have a busy fall. Thanks.
And I will note that November 6th meeting will be all virtual. Okay, thank you for the report, Nancy. And thanks for a solid meeting. Let's move to the last item, public comment. Go to good of the order. I look to Chris to see if there are any raised hands. I don't see any of those. Any comments in the chat? And open it up to anyone who wishes to speak. No comments? Okay, good to give fair warning so we didn't have to sit here in silence for a minute. With that, we will close the meeting. The next quarterly EFCC meeting will be on Tuesday, September 3rd. And
Yeah, sorry about that. That's my
Tuesday, September. I'm sorry. Yeah, of course. Today's the 3rd.
I miss.
Okay, how about Tuesday, the first week of January? The 7th, Tuesday, the 7th, January. Got that. Little stumble there. And look to committee members for some concurrence to close the meeting. Anything for the good of the order? Seeing heads shake and look to Eric. All right. Let's adjourn today's meeting at 11:43. Thank you for your time and for the effort that it takes to put these together. Have a good day.
Sorry about that.